Okay, so good morning, everybody. Today we're going to work on another piece of lesson. So in the past 2 weeks, I've been working on the DSC videos, but if you've looked closely at my Instagram channel, which is listed over here, which is called Shruti__Karen, you'd realize that I would not be continuing more DSC literature in English videos until we reach 30 subscribers. So if you're willing to gain more knowledge on the DSC syllabus for literature in English, please hop on to my Instagram account where you'd be able to get a link to Teachers Pay Teachers account, and you'd be able to get a chance to purchase my literature and English notes at a discounted price. However, if you are not willing to get a soft copy, or for some reason if you do not want to purchase it through Teachers Pay Teachers, you can email me on my account over here, which is shrutikaren.k@gmail.com. So in the following 2 weeks we will be focusing solely on the IGCSE syllabus, and also if you continue watching these parts of my video for the IGCSE curriculum for literature, you'd be able to also get latest updates on my study guide for the IGCSE syllabus. So today we'll be having a video for the literature paper 1 specifically. And do not worry, there will be other videos on paper 2 and paper 3 as well. So if you're willing to get more latest updates on this, please subscribe my YouTube channel, and also don't forget to click in the bell icon. At the same time, if you want to look at the DSC videos, they're already available on my YouTube channel, and I will paste some of the important video links below this video in the description below. So do feel free to check them out. So let us move on without further ado. So again, the IGCSE syllabus is something that is much more a simplified version, I'd say, compared to DSC and also the GCE stream. So in this video, as I said, we'll be focusing on paper 1 only rather than the other papers. So for paper 1, the examination lasts for 1.5 hours. So in total, you'd be having 90 minutes. And in paper 1, you'd have 2 sections, which is section A poetry or section A prose. So the overall total mark for these 2 sections is about 50 marks. So for section A, it's about 25 marks, and for section B, it's also 25 marks. So they both have an equal allocation of marks. So this generally means that both of the sections should have equal amounts of importance given. And also, it's important to understand that this examination is closed book. So of course you cannot take, let's say, your anthology or your sort of novels or plays with you. You've got to make sure that you've actually memorized any quotes if necessary. However, usually the text will be given to you, like the extract or the poetry will be given to you in the examination. You just need to make sure you're very familiar with it. So for section A poetry, it's about 25 marks, and you would only have 1 question. Now this is very important because some students, like during the examination, they fail to understand the importance of doing 1 question from section A. So usually they'll say question 1 or question 2. So you need to pay attention and make sure you're reading the instructions very carefully. So in section A, you just have to choose 1 question. And of course, you'd have an option of 2 questions, but you just choose 1 question. And for the prose, again, you've got to choose 1 question. And usually the choices will be more than 2, but at least there'll be 2 choices to choose from, and you just choose 1 question. Now in prose, it's important to realize that you can choose between an extract or a full text question. So you have to see which one fits like your skills and which one you think will give you the highest mark. Now I'd suggest to do, of course, a lot of practice papers. However, I'd say from my experience, even though you do a lot of practice papers, like sometimes it's just on spot, because if the question itself is let's say very difficult, for example, let's say I've always been doing extract questions from my past practice papers, and let's say if I go to the examination, I don't feel very comfortable with the extract questions, it's completely fine to like change during the exam and change it to a full text question. That's why I'd really suggest that you practice both extract and full text questions thoroughly and make sure you know what are the requirements for both of the questions, just in case there's like a completely weird question and like let's say you're not feeling comfortable with the question. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move on because this is not the focus. I want to focus more on how you can answer it and the skills you need. So this is basically how the past paper looks like. So in the link below this video, you'd be able to see at least one past paper for paper 1. I'll be sure to like include links to more past papers so that everything is more like in a centralized management. And I hope that somehow helps you. Of course, there's like lots of past papers and you can find it online. But for whatever reason, if you're unable to do so or you want something more centralized, don't worry, it will be possible and it will be pasted below anyway. So one of the most important notes that you need to take notice of is always following the instructions of the front cover. Now, if you've watched like other videos as well for the IGCSE curriculum, I'm not sure if you have or if this is just your first video of diving into the curriculum, but I'm sure a lot of videos do not really mention the importance of looking at the instructions in the cover place. I cannot emphasize how much it's important to look at the cover page. Now, I understand even though you do a lot of past papers, the instructions are technically the same every single year, but I'd say still spend about 30 seconds just to read through the instructions in your past paper. During the actual day of the exam, make sure you're actually reading the instruction just to make sure you don't miss out anything. And if you don't read instruction, it's not worth losing your marks of. So it's always a good idea just to have a quick look of the instructions. If you need additional answer paper, make sure you're asking the invigilator for a continuation booklet. Do not write in the margins. Absolutely do not do this because it will not be marked. Make sure that you're always giving content points, which is relevant to the question, and consistently read the content page. So this is the content page. It's just a subsection. So this is the continuation of the content page. Make sure that you're actually taking reference from the content page because this is so important. If you're not taking reference, you technically will lose control of the examination paper in front of you. So make sure that you're consistently reading through the content page for information. Okay, so as I've said, so if you've looked previously, as I've said, the first section that usually is covered is section A, poetry, and then the second section is section B. So first of all, in this part of the video, we're going to look at section A, poetry specifically first to make sure you can completely delve into a complete understanding of how this works. So when you're trying to have a paper 1, section A, you need to know what you're going to be tested on, and this is technically the same for section B. It's the same thing. So it's important. You don't have to memorize this information, but it's good to have some basic understanding of the entire syllabus before you're actually sitting for your examination. So, of course, the first part is understanding of the text. It's very important to understand your text in a very careful manner, which is why you need to revise again because it's a closed book examination. It's important to understand the context of the text that you receive. For example, the poetry you receive, you need to know about some background information. It's good to have some basic understanding of the writer as well, but usually it's not necessary. But if you do sort of know it and if you apply it to your examination, I think the markers will be very, very impressed. So this is something that is not necessary, but if you do so, it of course makes the markers impress and you get higher chances to be in the top band. So the blue highlighted things are something that's not necessary, but if you do it, I think it'd be great. So understanding the meaning and the message of the poem as well as the writer's intentions are extremely important, because if you do not have a basic understanding of your set text, that can be a very big problem. So make sure you're just trying to understand the meaning and the message of the poem. This also goes for section B, which will be explained in a later stage. Again, make sure that you're sort of equipping yourself with the knowledge of understanding how the writers use specific methods, which is generally the poetic techniques. This is a O, sorry about my handwriting. So this is the poetic techniques. You need to know, why did the writer choose this specific technique, and what is its overall effect on the its overall effect. The effect is generally on the audience, plus also at the bigger picture of the poem. So just trying to understand will really help. Of course, your ability to show that you understand and that you can comment on the language, structure, and form. So this is generally LSF. It's very important that you know this basic important understanding. Your ability to select and choose relevant quotations. So of course you need to read the question very carefully, which I will show you like in a later stage of how you can step by step sort of process your thinking process to make sure that you're choosing relevant quotes and relevant evidence to support your conceptualized points. Your ability to formulate a personal response. Okay, now this is only for students who are aiming for the top grade. I know a lot of videos would emphasize that this is a must, but I just want to tell you that, let's say if you've just got 1 week left for your IGCSE exam and you're just revising it at a very last moment stage because you've procrastinated too much, I'd say you don't need to have a personal response if you're not aiming for a top grade. Do not waste your time on getting a personal response. Try to turn your personal response into strong formulated points, because that can give you better scores. Personal response is only for those students who are aiming for the top scores. But if you're not aiming for those, I'd say just skip the personal response. So moving further on. Okay, so I'm sorry, this is just a little glitch over here. Okay, so how to answer this question properly. So this is just a nice little sample and extract that I've obtained. So of course this is copyright from one of the IGCSE sort of centralized past paper location. So nevertheless, let's continue. So how to answer this question properly. Now, the first step is to read the question carefully. The question is, how does Nicholas use words and images to create a powerful effect in this poem? So again, you must have read this poem before. It must have been in your anthology, but as I said, it's closed book. So you can't take your anthology with you, but they've given you the extract of the poem right here in front of you. So you have this extract. This is exactly a past paper and how it looks like. So you have to, again, read the question and underline the focus. So what is the focus of this question? How? How generally signifies the poetic techniques that you need to make sure is embedded in your answer. Now notice words and images to create a powerful effect. So those are the three important aspects of, not aspects, but I'd say three important things that you should really highlight in your question. Now for every person, this would be quite different. I didn't highlight Nicholson. Apologies for my pronunciation. I didn't highlight that surname because I believe it's very obvious that it is the writer's name. So I don't find it necessary to highlight the writer's name because it's basically self-explanatory. But I've highlighted the things that I think is very important for me, so that when I'm writing an answer to this question, I need to take reference to those three important key points. So how generally signifies that I need to include poetic techniques. I need conceptualized points to show my reasonings for how Nicholson really creates words and images to create a powerful effect. I know I'm repeating the question, but if you have a comprehensive understanding of the question, I think that's more than enough. So words and images, you need to make sure we're not talking about sounds. We're not talking about visual imagery. We're talking about Oh, sorry, we are talking about visual imagery because it's images here, but we're not talking about audio sounds. We're not talking about the lighting that's somehow shown throughout the images. We're not talking about the taste, the olfactory imagery. We're talking about visual imagery and the words. Now, words could include auditory imagery in terms of the sounds of words, but I'd say mostly focus on how they play with words. So like, for example, the order of the words, the malpropism. Is there something specific about it? Now, if you've looked consistently at my Instagram page, you'd see that I have a study guide for the DSC stream students, but in that book, you'd be able to gain a very comprehensive list of all the poetic devices that you should be able to know. So if there, for some reason, if you want to gain a entire copy of the poetic devices that you need to know, feel free to comment below this YouTube video, or feel free to email me to gain a complete non-exhaustive list of all the poetic devices. Number 2, the second step is always to make a mental note of what the poem is about. Now, I'm sure this must have been in your anthology, so it's always, as I've said, it's always a good idea to revise your anthology so you know what the poem is about. Try to link it to a particular bigger theme so that it helps you to remember about the techniques, the poetic techniques, the background information, the contextual background of the writer. Number 3 is a extension of step 2. So try to think, what type of poem is this? Is this a villanelle, or is this a haiku, or is this some sort of a freestyle poem? Why did the writer chose to write in such a specific manner? Why is there a lot of indentation? Why is the form of the poem written in this way? What is the style of the writer? What's the difference between the mood and the tone of this poem? Is there a specific intention that the writer wants to go through? Why is there quotes in this poem? Is it trying to somehow engage with the audience, or does it have some other purpose? Why is there a lot of use of polysyndeton? Is it because it's giving a childlike sort of feel, or is there some other purpose? So you've always got to brainstorm these things. It's very important to recall what you've learned and somehow apply it in your examination. Number 4 is, of course, reading through the poem and trying to highlight all the quotations that are relevant to the question. How do the techniques show focus in the question? Okay, so again, aim for L, S, and F. So if you forgot what is L, S, and F, it's basically language, structure, and form. Always aim for that. Aim for getting a good language, structure, and form, and maintain it throughout your essay. Lastly, number 5, make a very brief outline and plan. So before you actually begin writing, it's always a good idea to plan your overall essay. Now, this is very, very important, because if you can sort of plan your, I'd say, your essay, it's always a better thing to do, because you somehow linked up your conceptualized points with your evidence and good explanation as well. So you have some idea of the direction of the essay that you're taking it in. So without further ado, I'm going to go through the poetry. Okay, anyway, so we're going to go through the section A poetry, so it's a continuation over here. So this is the success criteria essay checklist. So you don't have to memorize this, but if you have some basic understanding of this, I think that'd be more than enough. So always make sure you have a relevant point. So make sure you have a relevant point to the question. Think if your content points is related to the question posed at hand. For example, if you're including evidence, so always you'd have a point, evidence, explanation, plus a link. So this is how a paragraph should look like. Okay, so making sure that your evidence links to the point is very essential. Make sure that your evidence, have you include some sort of examples? Did you take any quotation from the poem? Did you explain something afterwards to show how does the evidence sort of have a correlation with the poem? Lastly, did you link back to the question? Always explain the quotation, as I've said, with your conceptualized points. So this is something that you do in stage 3 of all of your paragraphs. Constantly signpost. So say, for example, one possible way that Nicholas used powerful language and imagery with words and images is through blah blah blah. For example, in this poem, in line, say the line number and then use the quotations and explain it, link it back to your question. Make sure that you're not being sidetracked at all. Read the question constantly while you're doing the essay. Now, many students find this very difficult to do. For example, when you're trying to do the question, many people find it difficult to read the question while doing the essay, but I'd say that is the perfect way to actually making sure you're striving for a correct pathway. Number 5 is, of course, making sure you have poetic techniques. Now, this is actually occurring at a second stage of your paragraph, but I'm just trying to list through the entire checklist to show you how things run. For your poetic devices and techniques, make sure you're trying to explain what is its overall effect and how does it have an impact on the audience? How does it bring an impact to the overall theme of the poem? Try to think, why did the poet specifically choose this technique? Why didn't he choose other techniques? Now, this is quite difficult to do in the middle of an examination, which is why I'd always suggest my students to revise your anthology. That is so important. Analyze the language used as usual and make sure that you don't have grammar issues in your essay. As I've said earlier, it's a good idea to include background contextual knowledge in your essay, but make sure you're only using it when it's necessary. When it's not necessary, please do not include it because it can seem irrelevant. Okay, so this is a continuation from this part. So again, it's continued. So make sure you know the possible effects on the readers. So whether that's positive or negative, nevertheless, make sure that you're sort of mentioning how it affects the readers. For example, let's say the constant use of the S in sibilance in the poem sort of contributes to the smoothness and the soft texture of the leaves, which emphasizes on the nature's quality. So this is just a sample that I've made on the spot. But again, if you've revised your anthology, you'd be able to do much better than me. Always remember to prove how your point is relevant to the question. So that is something that happens in stage 4, which is the link. So this happens in stage 4. So the skills that is required for this examination, specifically section A, is of course understanding and showing a good knowledge of what the poem is about, making sure that you've somehow emphasized on the tone, the mood, the speaker, and the themes. Now, sometimes it's not necessary to cover all these things. It of course depends on the question. But as I've said, if you find it relevant and if you think this sort of point about your tone and mood links to your question, I'd say you're more than welcome to mention it in your essay. Always show an in-depth knowledge, but of course don't go sidetracked and don't give over-analysis which is not really relevant to the question. Interpreting the poem, trying to find out any deeper meanings involved. For example, let's say if you see a phrase called white horses in a poem, try to think, what would white horses mean? Now, for some students who aren't really as capable and would need more practice, they would think, okay, it's basically white horses. It would symbolize that the horses are innocent because of the color white. But maybe when you actually look into the overall poem, I'll just mention the poem name here. So it's Poem in October. So if you actually pause this video for about like 5 minutes, this is something extra. Now, you don't have to do this, but if you just want to try to understand my point by what I mean by deeper meanings, feel free to just pause this video for 5 minutes, go to Google and search this poem up, and you'd be able to see a phrase called white horses, and try to think what is your analysis of white horses depending on the context of the poem. Now, if you've already visited the poem and if you've already read, I'm going to give you my interpretation. So white horses can generally mean the tinkling sounds of the rain, because they've mentioned mist and rain consistently throughout the poem. Also, it could generally mean the kneeling of the waves, because before the speaker actually gets up in the morning, we see a sort of image of the waves. So white horses could refer to the waves, or it could refer to the rain. Now, why do I link it in this way? Because white can show the idea of transparency. It can show the idea of purity, which relates to nature. Now, this is the idea of deeper knowledge, deeper meanings. If you aren't able to grasp this at this moment, that's completely fine. Feel free to continue watching my YouTube videos where I'll be able to create more videos to show you how you can really gain these deeper meanings and analysis. So it's okay, do not panic if you're not able to get these deeper meanings. I know it's difficult, but with time would be able to get on, so don't worry. So lastly, as I've mentioned, personal opinion. So only do this if you have time. Do this with practice in your practice papers. So I'm going to pause the video here for now, and if you want to learn more about the paper 1 section B, which is the prose, hop on to my next video. I'd be stopping it for now, and if you have any questions, as I've said, go to my Instagram page, which the link will be given below in this video. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email me, and if you go to the beginning and the introduction of this video, you'd be able to see my email address in any case. So thank you so much, guys. Don't forget to subscribe and click in the like button, and also click in the bell icon.